Good morning, everyone. We'll get started here in, I'm going to give it about one more minute and then we'll get started. And this is being recorded, so if we miss anything or need to come back to it, you guys can come back and watch it. But I just wanted to give you a heads up. But let's give it just about one more minute and see if a couple more people show up. Thanks. All right, it's 9:31-ish, and very quickly, my name is Autumn Coleman, and I work for Montana DNRC, and I have been working on the ARPA program since it began, just a little over a year and a half ago, I think is what it is now. So, and I'm joined today by a bunch of other DNRC folks, as well as Cody Ferguson from Department of Commerce. So thanks you guys for jumping on today. So what we're going to go through today is the ARPA water and sewer grants for the flood response for irrigation systems. And right now, the proposed grant application and guidelines are published in draft form, and we're seeking public comment. So it's a pretty quick turnaround for public comment period. Those public comments will be due by July 9th or July 18th at noon. But I also will be taking any feedback that you guys have during this meeting, any questions, comments you guys have during this meeting. Those will be incorporated as best we can into the final grant application and guidelines, and that will be open for viewing and training starting next week. So let me just get started with the schedule. Okay, so if you guys haven't already seen it on our water and sewer page, we have the proposal and the link there as well to the proposal. Again, public comments due Monday at noon. The Infrastructure Advisory Commission will meet July 27th at 10 a.m. and we'll be discussing the application as well as comments and feedback received. And I'll be doing a presentation to them about the irrigation grants. You can send your public comments to us to our email address at dnrarpa@mt.gov, or you can give them to us during this presentation as well. So very quickly, here's the schedule for this program. So this week, which is July 11th through the 15th, the draft application and guidelines were posted. Public comments due on Monday at noon. And then sometime, hopefully early next week, depending on how many comments we receive, we will be finalizing the application and the guidelines. We'll also conduct an online training session, probably later in the week. I haven't scheduled that yet, but I will here pretty quick. And then we're going to start working with Department of Commerce to get impacted communities working with the technical service providers. And Cody's going to jump online and talk about that here in a little bit. The following week, which is July 25th through the 29th, we will have the IAC meeting on the 27th. I will do a couple of Q&A sessions about the application, so probably online question and answer sessions, so people can hop online once they have a chance to look at the application and ask me anything. Again, and we're going to really emphasize this, is that we're trying to get as many people connected with that technical assistance through Department of Commerce. The applications, barring no major episodes here, the applications will open August 1st. And then from August 1st up until probably the 19th, we'll be reviewing those applications and certifying them because we have a Infrastructure Advisory Commission meeting tentatively scheduled for August 24th. And so we'll review applications for completeness. If we have any issues, we'll send them back. And as soon as they're complete, we'll do reviews for those. And they'll be put together on a list for the Infrastructure Advisory Commission based on the kind of first come, first serve. So once a complete application is received, it basically will receive a date and time stamp, and then that's how they'll be prioritized for the Infrastructure Advisory Commission. So if there's if we don't spend all of our money, we'll continue to review any applications received after August 24th until all of the funds are gone. So this irrigation grant program, if you haven't kind of been keeping track of what ARPA water and sewer funds are for, I'm going to go over it really quickly. So hopefully it's not very repetitive for most of you, but so the ARPA funds came to the state of Montana back in January of 2021. And luckily we were in the middle of a legislative session at the time. And so the Montana legislature met, passed House Bill 632, which designated the ARPA funds into these different silos or these different tracks. So ARPA funds went to broadband and health-based initiatives and some other programs, but we're dealing with entirely the water and sewer projects. And so House Bill 632 is the piece of state legislation that appropriated money to water and sewer projects. It also established the Infrastructure Advisory Commission, and you'll hear me talk about the Infrastructure Advisory Commission throughout this process. The Infrastructure Advisory Commission is key to reviewing DNRC's work on the grant application review and certification. They also make recommendations to the governor as to which projects to fund, and then the governor has the final say on which projects get awarded. So you'll hear me kind of talk about the structure of the ARPA legislation, which is federal. You'll hear me talk about House Bill 632, and then you'll hear me talk about the Infrastructure Advisory Commission. Those are three kind of key pieces of legislation or the decision making that kind of govern this grant program. So there's some things in this grant program that are flexible, like some of the questions we ask, but there's some things in this grant program that are inflexible. And so I'll try to make sure I talk about the parts that we don't have any flexibility on. So the flood response irrigation grant program was created. House Bill 632 set up a couple of different grant programs for water and sewer funds. The first was a minimum allocation grant program. And I just want to throw a little note in right now while we're talking about those. Minimum allocation grants are still open for applications right now. And if you guys have questions about that, I would be happy to spend some time talking about those on sort of, when we get towards the end of this presentation. But minimum allocation grants went to cities, counties, and towns, and there's quite a bit of money left open. Those applications are due by November 1st. So that was the first grant program House Bill 632 established. The second one is the competitive grant program. And so the competitive grants, we established a ranking system. We have gone through 2 rounds of applications. But back, boy, I don't know, I lose track of time. Back a while ago, the Infrastructure Advisory Commission wanted to prioritize funds for irrigation projects. And so the Infrastructure Advisory Commission recommended that we set aside 10 million to fund irrigation projects. So we created an irrigation grant program, and out of that 10 million, we funded about 8.8 million in projects, which left 1.2 million unawarded, unallocated. And sorry, I'm going to answer James's question very quickly. James, I noticed that you're logged in twice, so as a participant. So I don't know if maybe you have your phone and your computer on. That would cause an echo. But if other people are getting an echo, I can stop. If you guys want to raise your hand if you're getting an echo. Okay, looks like we got it. All right. Sorry about that. Anyway, back to the 1.2 million. So 1.2 million, again, was the kind of unspent competitive funds for the irrigation grants. And around the time when the flooding happened, the Infrastructure Advisory Commission wanted to support the folks that have been impacted by the floods, and in particular, the irrigation community. And so the commission recommended, and the governor supports this, that this 1.2 million should go to funding irrigation projects that were impacted by the floods this spring. So that's how we get to the 1.2 million, long story short. So because this is within the competitive grant program, so House Bill 632 again created this competitive grant program. There's some requirements of that competitive grant program. The first is that it has to be an eligible applicant, and I'll cover that here in a second. Match is required, and in fact it says that projects should be given consideration based on the higher match rate. The Infrastructure Advisory Commission set aside these funds for agricultural irrigation projects, and I'll define those for you. The Infrastructure Advisory Commission recommended a cap of $250,000 per project under this grant program. We have some pretty stringent ARPA deadlines, and I'll talk about those. So that is in the federal legislation piece. Our draft deadline to open these applications is August 1st, 2022, and we'll keep it open until all the funds are gone. And the commission recommended, and the governor agreed, that we should do these on a first come, first served basis. So we don't have to require a bunch of information, do this complicated, ranking, and that just absorbs a lot of time. So we're going to look at these in terms of eligible projects when they're received, and then make recommendations to the commission based on first in line. All right, so who are the eligible applicants? So House Bill 632 again defines eligible applicants. So these are the only people that can apply for these funds. Cities and towns, counties, consolidated city counties, school districts, regional water authorities, water and or sewer districts, irrigation districts, water users associations, conservation districts, and tribal governments. So that doesn't necessarily mean that other people cannot work with a local government. So if your organization, like a ditch company, is not on that list, you can work with a local government to apply on your behalf. And so a lot of times what we'll see is counties applying on behalf of another entity. So I want to just pause here for a second, because this is a pretty significant or kind of interesting thought about, could it be a private farmer? Could it be a private irrigator? Yes, it could be. But what I want to caution you is that the agreements that we have between DNRC, who manages these funds, and the local government who applies, sometimes those local governments can pass through the funds to another entity, but most of the time they cannot. And so that means that the local government, in this case, this example would be Carbon County, they would be the recipients of the funds and they would be the ones to ensure that the project is delivered. So, but it can happen on a piece of private property. It can happen for a private irrigator, but the funds cannot go to that private irrigator. Similarly, some of the ditch companies could not receive it as well. We'll have to look at those on a case-by-case basis. And there's a couple, very key issues that we have to look at is, one, is it a for-profit, non-for-profit status? And two, does it have the technical, managerial, and financial capability to manage federal funds? So just as a reminder, ARPA funds are federal, even though they come through the state of Montana. And with that comes a lot of strings and requirements that the federal government has for managing this money. So just to be very clear on that, the projects can benefit individual property owners or private ditch companies, but the funds may not flow from the county to those private individuals, or private ditch companies. So the next question I get a lot of is, what is match? And I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this because of the whole interaction with FEMA and NRCS down in the flooded areas. So what is match? So House Bill 632, again, states that local governments have to provide match in order to be eligible for these funds. So the commission in another, basically when we were doing round 2, tagged on the term committed match to that. So we will be looking for local governments that are providing committed match. What committed match is that it's actual, either cash in hand or grants or loans that have been awarded, not ones that you will apply for in the future. So basically it's, the difference between, oh, you guys have another grant and you're working on it versus you will apply for that grant in the future. So match can be in-kind services, it can be cash, it could be donations, or it could be state or federal grants. So the way that we will use match is that in the instance where there's a tiebreaker, so as we get, the money kind of spent down, if we're looking at 2 projects that are kind of in this tiebreaker scenario, the match will be used to, choose one project over the other. So it'd be the higher committed match rate. And this is the big exclamation point, the big caution for everyone, is that ARPA funds are federal funds, even though they move through the state of Montana and there'll be an agreement between DNRC and the local government. These are still federal funds, and they may not be eligible to meet the non-federal match requirement from like FEMA or NRCS as examples. So I want to say that again. So ARPA funds are federal funds, and they may not be eligible to meet non-federal match requirements. So a lot of times the federal funds require a non-federal match. And basically what they want to do is make sure that the local government or the landowner or whoever has vested interest in this project. And so they require a non-federal match, and it's like, great. So that doesn't mean that you can't use ARPA funds and NRCS funds on a project. You absolutely 100% can. So you can use ARPA funds and NRCS funds to fund a project, but you're still going to have to, from NRCS's perspective, find that non-federal match. So ARPA funds don't care if it's federal money or non-federal. We just need, committed match. So it's a little confusing, and I can happily give you a couple of examples if you want. But the match requirement, it's not a percentage base. It's not anything like that from ARPA's perspective. we followed as closely to House Bill 632 as we possibly could. So a lot of communities for the ARPA funds, they'll use the local fiscal recovery funds that went directly to that local government. They'll use a loan they've received, they'll use another grant they've received, or they'll contribute their local assessment dollars to provide match. So I hope that makes sense. All right. And if not, throw something in the question or answer or question Q&A box, throw it in the chat and I can go back over that. So our projects that are eligible for this grant program, again, we have to go through these very specific gates of eligibility. So the first one is the ARPA fund that was set up to fund water and sewer infrastructure. So when House Bill 632 was passed, when we first knew about ARPA, we literally had a statement that said necessary investments in water and sewer infrastructure. And we were like, okay, what's that? And then Treasury issued their rules. And from that, they said, okay, necessary investments in water and sewer infrastructure actually means projects that are eligible under the Clean Water State Revolving Fund or Clean Water SRF program or the Drinking Water SRF program, which suddenly made a lot of sense because now we had a whole playbook of projects that we could fund. So obviously irrigation projects are not in the Drinking Water SRF program, so I'm not even going to talk about that. But the Clean Water SRF program references basically agricultural best management practices. So we're moving from ARPA, which is Treasury, to the Clean Water SRF program, saying, okay, we've got ARPA covered, we've got the Clean Water SRF portion. What does that mean? And so the Clean Water SRF talks about projects that will reduce non-point source pollution or pollutants. And so it also says that these projects must implement a non-point source management plan. So we were like, great, DEQ in Montana has a non-point source management plan. And all of these documents are hyperlinked in this presentation, which we'll post this presentation online. So if you ever want to go read those, they're there for you. So what we did is we went and we looked at that non-point source management plan, and we looked at projects that would relate to irrigation. And so from there, we then join it with the definition of agricultural irrigation as was set up by the Infrastructure Advisory Commission. And then we've also tacked on the requirement that these projects must address the damage that was created during the spring floods of 2022. So essentially, if you're thinking about it, we have to make sure we walk through all of these kind of gates of eligibility. And so from there, this is kind of where we've created the application questions. This is how we have to look at them in terms of eligibility. So the first questions that you'll see in the application are really trying to ask about the flooding that happened, the damage that occurred from the flooding, which water body flooded, which, when did it happen? And that's to address the flooding question. The second set of questions about kind of the project are, tell us about the agricultural irrigation component. This was a really key issue when we first created the grant program, is that irrigation has to address agricultural croplands. So again, not like lawns, things like that. So it has to go very specifically to agricultural cropland, and we've created a definition around that. And then next is this water quality benefit. So you're going to hear me kind of really harp on this whole water quality benefits and working on reducing non-point source pollution. The first two questions, they make a lot of sense, but this one is kind of a new, newer sort of concept for a lot of the irrigators that I've worked with. But non-point source pollution is basically any kind of pollutants that run off in a diffuse manner. So where a city's wastewater outfall comes through a pipe and goes into a water body. That is a point source that is regulated. Non-point source pollutants are non-regulated, and they can occur from roads, forestry practices, mining, agricultural lands, modification to the floodplain or stream banks, things like that. So the key pollutants that we're really talking about here, as far as what is non-point source pollution, we talk a lot about sediment from erosion. We talk a lot about nutrients. We talk a little bit about temperature and salinity, but I think the key ones that we're going to see in this program are real sediment and nutrient based. And a lot of the questions that are in this grant application really drive towards those two. So eligible projects. So what are we looking at for eligible projects? And we did create a list of projects that are going to be kind of meet the eligibility criteria and put those in the application. There's a potential for you to answer other and explain to us how a project we couldn't comprehend could fit in this program. But if we kind of created just a brief list of the types of projects that would be eligible for this program. So the first one is diversion maintenance or replacement. So if your diversion was damaged and you need to fix it or replace it, that would be eligible, because essentially by maintaining, improving or maintaining or replacing those diversion structures, irrigators are better able to manage the flow of water to crops, reducing the potential for overwatering, which can then lead to surface flows and basically sedimentation of surface water bodies. So by replacing those with better structures, easily managed structures, you're going to be able to control that flow of water. We also recommend that anytime you replace head gates in particular or other diversion structures, that you include water measurement devices with that, so that you can better, again, measure and control that flow of water. The next one we have is canal repair or conversion. So canals, I understand quite a few canals were severely damaged in this. They may have been lined or unlined. And so we have a couple categories for canal repair or conversion. So that can be reshaping, repairing your canal that blew out or was damaged, relining it, or lining it to begin with, repairing concrete liner or the other types of liners, and basically stabilizing that canal, revegetating that area, and reducing the amount of erosion and sediment that that canal carries. There's other water quality benefits from lining canals, and they're included in there. And then the other one that's kind of specifically talked about in the application is the irrigation tailwater control. So sediment catch basins or any other sort of structure that needs to be installed or replaced in order to catch any irrigation tailwater, let the sediment settle out of that before water is discharged back into surface water. So essentially, we're really concerned about the amount of sediment or nutrients in the surface water bodies. And yes, irrigation canals is surface water, but when we talk about water quality benefit, we're really talking about the rivers or streams where water is either diverted from or released back into. So I also included a lot of questions about best management practices. So best management practices are one of the easiest ways to control non-point source pollutants as part of a construction project. So in these construction projects that you have where you will replace a structure or rebuild a canal or something like that, we require that you consider best management practices as part of that construction project. And I provided a very brief list of those commonly used best management practices for construction. One is working during low water, for example. The other is You know, I don't know, there's a bunch of them, but key really is to reduce the amount of erosion and sediment coming off of your disturbed area or off of the construction site. Another key one to consider is, fencing to allow that area to recover quickly or revegetate quickly. So fencing cattle out, things like that, will the area stabilizes. So there's a few questions in there about those best management practices. And then finally, a lot of times these irrigation repair projects will include other sort of components to them, I'll just say that will actually improve sediment or reduce the amount of sediment going in, or reduce erosion. And so I listed a handful of those if you're going to do those in conjunction with your irrigation project. For example, one could be like abandoning roads that were impacted by flooding, restoring those to natural vegetation, restoring stream banks, revegetating areas that were damaged in the area of the irrigation structures. Again, fencing, things like that. So if there are other things that you're doing in conjunction with the repair replacement, just select those questions on the application and let us know. All right, so very quickly, and I couldn't get away with this without, I couldn't say this without getting chastised for it later, but dams and reservoirs are not eligible for repair or replacement of dams and reservoirs are not eligible for these types of projects. Under the Treasury final rule, they clarified that dams and reservoirs are only eligible if their primary purpose is drinking water supply. I will add, however, that dam removal and total restoration is eligible under this program. So if you need to repair a dam that was damaged by flooding, we cannot fund that project. Couple of questions. We ask a bunch of questions about your budget. So again, you can ask for up to $250,000 per project. So that doesn't mean that you can ask for less than that for sure. So you can ask for up to 250,000, but you don't have to max that out. If you only need 100,000, that's perfectly fine. You do have to provide committed match. So you'll have to provide what the match source is, and then upload letters or other documentation that show the committed match. And then we have to look at the budget in terms of eligible project expenses. So I will say that there's not a lot of things that are ineligible, but we do have to go through and check, which leads me to my final point, which is that there's a budget narrative that is required. And that is how the reviewers here at DNRC look at your budget, make sure that everything in there is eligible for the program. So just a couple little points on budget. And then I wanted to just highlight a couple quick things. So I'm actually gonna, after this presentation, I'm gonna walk out to the website so you guys can see where everything is. On our ARPA water and sewer homepage, if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see our calendar and those trainings that we'll schedule here for how to apply for this and walk through the application in much more detail. The question and answer period, those sessions will all be posted here on this calendar, and you can select these and then link them to your calendar. If you are, sorry, let me back up. So right above there is our kind of blue toolbar banner, but this is where you can sign up for our email notices, where you'll get spam email from us saying, hey, the application's open, or hey, here's a commission meeting. If you are looking for training, or if you're looking for recorded trainings, again, this is recorded. We'll post this along with the slides. If you want to go back and watch that, it's here on our looking for training page. And then most importantly is if you need help with your application, Department of Commerce Again, they do have technical assistance to help communities apply. And I'm going to have Cody jump on here really quick when I walk out to the website here. So let me stop share, and I'm going to introduce you guys to Cody Ferguson, who's so kindly calling in from Wisconsin. So go ahead, Cody.
Hi, thanks, Autumn. Yeah, as Autumn said, so we have created a program in the Department of Commerce where we contracted with 10 engineering firms in the state. And so to speed up getting applications submitted and then help, really walk you guys through all the questions you might have about those applications, we can assign you one of those firms. And so we can assign them for up to 20 hours of technical assistance to kind of help identify the problem, talk in engineer speak and answer the questions that DNRC is looking for in the application process. If you've already received some assistance from the program, but you experience damages because of flooding or applying for one of these grants, we can assign you another 20 hours. We're more interested, I think, in getting you guys the assistance and helping get the applications in to get you guys funding and the details if you've already had assistance. So the way to access assistance on the main page here, that red button that says contact us, if you just click on that, you can contact us through the email, or you can place a phone call, and you can just say, hey, I want some help with my application. We'll get that message, and then we'll have our folks get back in touch with you and get things set up as soon as we can. So I think that's it.
Yeah, thank you, Cody, and I hope
Yep.
you enjoy the rest of your vacation.
Yeah, it's a rainy day in Wisconsin.
Right. Okay, and then thanks, Cody. And the program has been very successful too, and also Department of Commerce staff is really helpful in filling out or helping you fill out applications if you have a few questions. So again, you just go to the arpa.mt.gov, and I'll back out to that site again. So arpa.mt.gov, contact us, and on the left-hand side, email or call us, and then request that technical assistance with your application. Also, this is the frequently asked questions page, and from here you can drop down to water and sewer, and we have quite a few frequently asked questions published here. So you may even be able to find the answer to some of your questions here. You can also submit your questions via email or call the call center, and they'll make sure that your questions get directed to the appropriate person. So essentially, it's sometimes hard to reach us, the ARPA folks, directly, but if you go through the call center, they'll make sure that your questions get answered promptly. Okay, so backing out to arpa.mt.gov. We have the kind of landing page for arpa.mt.gov, and this is where all of the ARPA funds came through the state of Montana, and these are the different areas they went to. So there's a lot of information here, but we always go to water and sewer, and it just takes a second to load. So here's our ARPA water and sewer grant page. Here, right up top here is the public comment about the irrigation flood response irrigation grants. And I'm going to zoom in for you guys. All right, there we go. And so we have a very short statement on here. Here's the email address to send your public comments to. And then if you click on this link, should pop open the application guidelines, an application with instructions. And then Catherine Sertalik, who's here with us today, created a blank application for you guys to look at as well. So if you want to see it without all the little instruction boxes, you can download that there. Again, these are draft. We're taking public comment or taking stakeholder feedback. We'll tune these up, clean these up, and get them published online. We will be creating its own page. So from the homepage here, you'll jump to an irrigation grant page which will have all the information for you. But for now, we wanted to keep it kind of out on the homepage. And if you scroll down here, you're going to see this blue bar. If you're looking for training, there's our tools and resources page. Here's our e-newsletter that you can sign up for. Need help with your application. It basically gives you the same instructions that Cody gave. And then once I get those trainings scheduled during the week of the 18th, as well as the Q&A sessions, it'll pop up down here on this calendar. I'm going to go back really quickly to the guidelines and walk just through those very, very quickly. And then I want to just leave a few minutes for questions if you guys have any. So again, a lot of the upfront information in this is kind of setting the stage, setting the context for the ARPA requirements, the Clean Water SRF requirements, House Bill 632 requirements, the federal management of funds requirements, things like that. So they are all very important sections to read. But I can understand if you're kind of more interested in what the application looks like. So I'm going to breeze through quite a bit of this. Let's see, pardon me when I rapid scroll here. So just really quick though, this I did put in a kind of a little bit more detail on how the application reviews will go. And this eligibility criteria is what we have to look at as far as before we can certify a project to be eligible. And then that's considered by the Infrastructure Advisory Commission. So we're not scoring these, they're not scored, but this is a pass-fail system. And if you fail any of these, then the project is ineligible. So if you turn in an application and we find that it's incomplete, we'll send it back to you with a list of what on it is incomplete. And we'll try to do that as quickly as possible. And then when you submit a complete application, that's actually kind of the date timestamp that the application will have as we kind of move forward with these lists for the commission. I do have I kept in here the brief description of the minimum allocation grants. Again, those are still open. The deadline is November 1st, 2022 to apply. That pool is limited to only cities, counties, and towns, however. I'm going to skip through this and go straight to the application portion. All right. So here, starting on page 18, is what the application will look like. So again, if you have questions, comments, suggestions on how we can word things better in the application, we would love to hear it. So I tried to dial back the questions on this just to kind of those key eligibility points. And so if something isn't making sense, I would love to hear it. So the basic information about who's applying, where's the application coming from, who's the authorized person. So it'd be like a mayor, county commissioner, a board chair, something like that. We go through kind of some more contact type information. We do have to have this project certified. It's a requirement of House Bill 632. It's a fairly easy certification. If you have questions on that, I'm going to skip through this. We do need a project location. So you do need to give us a pretty good lat long on there. And we do have a tool that you can look up your latitude and longitude. We need to know what county it is. And so here's where we get into kind of the beef of the application. So, what is the need for the project? Again, we're tying this to the spring floods of 2022, the agricultural irrigation pieces. So we ask a handful of questions about that. And then we ask for a short narrative project or problem summary. Now, I just want to caution you that the problem summaries are used to communicate the need for this project to the Infrastructure Advisory Commission, the public, and even the governor. So these need to be pretty short, succinct. They need to clearly identify this as a flood impact, agricultural irrigation project, and, kind of the cost of not fixing it. So, what types of crops are suffering losses because of this, so on and so forth. And then key to that is what was the irrigation infrastructure that was damaged. And then the project goals and objectives and effectiveness, these are actually required as part of House Bill 632. When we do more comprehensive training, I'll kind of walk through some some smart ideas on how to write these sections. The project summary has to clearly identify the steps that the project needs to go through in order to be successful. And then the project eligibility as far as water quality is concerned. Again, the project has to have a water quality benefit. We'd really like to know which water body flooded and caused the damage. But also we'd really like to know what water body will be receiving the benefit of this project. So if you're going to reduce erosion in a river, just tell us which river that is. So then again, we sort of created a short list of eligible projects. If your project is something other and it doesn't fit into these categories, hit other and it'll pop up in a box where you can describe your project. And this is the question about the erosion control sediment measures that'll be planned for construction. Again, these are those best management practices or BMPs during construction project. And then any other erosion sediment control measures that will be implemented with this project. And then finally, if we've missed anything or you guys have another water quality benefit, go ahead and let us know what those are and try to be as descriptive as possible, because this is really key for us to evaluate the eligibility for the project. And then next is that does the project have any benefits such as fish or wildlife habitat? It is a required question, which is yes or no, but if you select no, it doesn't kick the project out. We just want to know, maybe the diversion structure will include a fish screen, something like that. We do need a project map and photos. We would very much appreciate photos of the structure pre and post flood if you have those, but especially post flood. Then the schedule. So project schedule is, pretty important for us to make sure that, I guess, the project has a intent to move through all of the sort of regulatory requirements. And so we did include kind of list of things that you might want to consider when putting together the schedule. And if you have concerns about this, again, I think the best method would be to connect with Department of Commerce, get that engineering tech support, things like that to work through the schedule. But we do very much look at the schedule to make sure the project is feasible within the required ARPA timeframes. Speaking of required ARPA timeframes, Treasury's final rule and ARPA all along has said that basically projects have to be obligated or under contract before December 31st, 2024, and all work completed, closed out, checks written, everything else, and all done, reported on by December 31st, 2026. So we have you give us a schedule of what your project looks like. If you have any documents that you've already completed as far as this project moves along, you can upload those and share those with us. We ask about water rights. Again, water rights are a very important part of irrigation projects. So if you have existing water rights, you just need to share with us documentation of that. If you need to make changes to your water right as a result of this project, you have to give us some details on that. And if you don't have water rights, it's very concerning. So yeah, if we run into that situation, I guess we'll have to have a pretty lengthy conversation about that. So we ask you to give us a project budget, and there's 2 tables of the project budget. Those are standard for all of our projects. And then we ask for a committed fund, so documentation of the funds that demonstrate that you have the match, and then the budget narrative. And budget narratives are really key for us to look at, to make sure that all of the expenses in your budget are eligible for ARPA funds. So again, we'll cover this in a lot more detail when we do the training on the application and even in the subsequent Q&A sessions. Then finally, you just tell us exactly how much money you're asking for from us, what your match is, what the total project cost is. And then if you have any other supplemental information, letters of support, whatever you might have, you can go ahead, or news articles, things like that, you can go ahead and upload those. So we have some sort of, check this box, I understand I have to things, and that's the application. So again, this is draft right now. We're, in the process of getting feedback, of which this meeting is key. So I think that is all I wanted to cover today. Oh, wait, I wanted to show you guys one more thing, just because, how we're going to get this information out, how we're going to distribute this information. So we've been thinking about how to best reach the irrigators that are impacted by this. And so DNRC is finalizing its 2022 flood recovery resources page, which actually it's linked to, let me back even up further. So we've essentially been sending everybody to Montana Disaster and Emergency Services. So Montana DES, where you can, let me back up here even. So if you just go to DES Montana, the very first link at the top is the June 2022 flooding event resources. And it goes through individual assistance, property damage, and then here's the flood recovery resources page, which then jumps you to floodrecovery.mt.gov. And it links you to FEMA, flood damage survey, latest information, helps you connect people with FEMA individual assistance, small business, disaster emergency assistance, things like that, and then get more information. And so DNRC's coming soon page should be linked here pretty quick, but I'll show you essentially what it looks like. So say the ARPA funds aren't your cup of tea for whatever reason, you actually need a different funding source for your project for whatever reason. We, on the DNRC flood recovery resources page, we do have a list of all of our other grant and loan programs. So the one at the top here is the ARPA water and sewer minimum allocation grants. Then we have flooding response irrigation grants. Then we have emergencies, private entities, planning grants, private loans, emergency loans, SRF loans, and then rangeland improvement loans. And we have our contact information below there. And then there's a bunch of information here on permitting as well. Like I said, that'll be linked to that flood recovery page here soon, but here's a sneak preview of it. Let's see. So with that, I'm going to probably stop blathering on here, but and open up for any questions. And you can ask questions a couple different ways. You can raise your hand and we can promote you to speak. You can type it in the Q&A section or the chat, and we'd be happy to cover anything. Or if you have feedback on the application, you can feel free to share that as well. So great. Open up the floodgates, I guess. Oh no, too soon. Sorry. Well, it looks like people are dropping off too. So, oh, Mike's here. I'll Mike to talk. All right. Hi, Mike. How are you?
Doing good, Autumn. How are you?
Good.
Good. So, Autumn, I just had a, and do you intend, it's pretty short timing as far as the application deadline. Do you have an intent, I guess, to do like a public service announcement of this or some direct mailings out to the irrigation projects that might have been impacted, that type of thing?
Yeah, I think though, I've been thinking a lot about that, Mike, on how to do that. And I'm thinking I'll start with the counties, because we do work a lot with the counties for their grant people, but also working through the DES. And then I know a lot of the irrigators in that country are working with NRCS right now as well, on these projects. So I think we'll, once we have the official announcement that the application is finalized with those dates for the training and the Q&As, we'll do a mailer or some sort of outreach to them. But and I was going to contact DES and ask them how to best do a public service announcement as well. So and then if you have a list of folks that you could send it to, that would be good.
Thanks, Autumn.
Oh, and we're reaching out to conservation districts as well. And they're, you know, the conservation districts down in the flooded areas have been really key in working with irrigators to bridge that gap between them and NRCS. And so they've been applying for emergency watershed grant funds for NRCS. So we'll make sure we get this information to those conservation districts as well.
Okay.
I think that's kind of my plan right now, but if there's other places I should put this, I'm happy to do it.
Autumn, we have a question in the Q&A
Sure,
from,
just saw that.
okay,
Yeah.
great.
So yeah, so the question is, just to clarify, the county needs to apply on behalf of the ditch companies that were affected by the flood. Yes, it would either be the county or conservation district, or it could be an irrigation district, could be a city or town, could be a school district. So any of those local governments that are eligible would have to apply on behalf of a ditch company. Yes. Any other questions? All right, well, with that, I'll probably kill it just a few minutes early. So there's a comment I saw, or no, Q&A. Oh, so the question is, can an irrigation district apply directly? Yes. So irrigation districts that are, irrigation districts that are formed under, and I can't ever remember the authority, they're formed under, registered with the Secretary of State, can apply directly for funds. Yes. The question is, does this program imply the project is engineered, designed ahead of time? Oh, that's a great question, actually, Alan, and I probably should cover that a little bit more. So the ARPA funds can be actually used for the planning, engineering, design work that you might need to do. It can also pay for the construction as well. So if you need to do the engineering, if you need to do the planning, if you need to do the surveying, things like that, ARPA funds can be used for that as well. So just, if in the application, if you know that's the case, you'll have to give us a budget narrative that kind of talks about the, engineering, design costs, things like that. We understand that it's a hard thing to budget for things lately, but you'll have to just give us an estimate, show us how you did your math. We're not looking to correct your math necessarily. We're just making sure that it was like thoughtful on how much time, and how much the engineering costs are, and then the whatever construction budget that you have. And then any materials, if you kind of can guess how much your materials would be. So yes, but you can do anything from initial assessments all the way to construction with these funds. Any other questions? And again, I guess one last thing about the engineering piece is that I think getting connected with Department of Commerce right away to get that 20 hours of technical assistance to help apply is going to be super, super beneficial for a lot of folks down there. So definitely take advantage of it. It's been huge for the projects that we've funded so far. And it's like having an advocate that can speak our language, which is sometimes hard. So okay, we'll give it like another 10-15 seconds, and then I'll kick us all out. So again, we'll publish this recording of this presentation as well as the slides that I showed on our tools and resources page. The email address to submit public comments to, and I'll type it in the chat, is DNR ARPA, ARPA @mt.gov. Oops, that just went to hosts and panelists. Let's see, try this again to everyone. You'd think I'd learn how to use Zoom by this point. All right, well, thank you everyone, and have a great weekend, and look to our website for updates on trainings and the final application. So great. That I'll kick us all out. Okay, thanks everyone. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, Autumn.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Adam.
Thanks, Cody.